Okay, there we are. Okay. Yes. Consenting to. Oh, this is the touch screen part. Okay. I've got to do that.
I'm Danny Dilks. I'm also one of Claire's doctoral students. I'm a flex-time student, so I actually work full-time and PhD part-time. And my doctoral research focuses on critical digital pedagogy. So looking at inclusive pedagogies and how education systems kind of serve to exclude certain people and how we can change that to include everyone. That's what I'm excited to do.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So can we just do a round the table, everybody just saying a bit about who they are, and so we all kind of get to sort of visually also see who we are. Can I start with you, Thomas?
Oh, yes. So my name is Thomas. I'm just graduated from the Western University in London, Ontario. So currently I'm in the CP program. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's good because
I actually work at Western University.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I came in from London this morning.
so both of you may have come in this morning from London. Journey. Okay, I'm just going to let Hugo Foster. Okay.
Hi, my name is Frank. I come from China. Currently, I'm in my first year of curriculum and pedagogy program built in online teaching and online, learning. Yeah, sorry about that. And it's very nice to meet you here, and I want to learn more strategies in detail about online teaching, how to design courses for online teaching platforms.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. So this person, okay, I'm about to admit somebody real. Good. Persons to okay. So I'm trying to coordinate all these things.
Hi everyone. My name is Lulu, but you can call me Lulu. Yeah, I didn't work in the education field before, but my last job was in a business review magazine, and we create and design the educational content for online users. We have about 200,000 subscribers, and we got stuck when we tried to design more instructional content. And so that's why I'm here. I want to learn the fundamental method to design the courses and
Thank you. I will say though, there's also in CTL we offer a really good instructional design course specifically, whereas our course here is more about theories of learning, and it's more foundational in terms of getting that information, and we use that to so they're not dissimilar, but they are slightly different.
And
so
it's related, and it's
so it's an additional course that might be useful for you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hao Chen, and I graduated from McMaster University in the program of mathematics. So and there are a lot of theories, so kind of related, I would say. And I think I met Arena before last year in GCC.
It did? Like, you mean online?
Online.
Okay. What am I doing?
Oh, okay.
It is. So,
In the writing center?
Yeah, in the
Okay. Nice to meet you.
That's cool. Yeah, last year this time, right? And that's it. I kind of think the online environment is going to be the trend for the future.
Yes.
Yeah, so I really want to learn this.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Jin Lu, and I'm from China. And I'm currently a curriculum and pedagogy program student. And it's my second year and last semester at OEZ. And I'm really interested in online teaching and learning, so I'm here.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Nkiru. I'm an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
And this is my last semester before I'm in the field of online learning. So I think that will be going into this and or it's going to be part of what teacher. So really good to get to understand it better and know how to support that in that environment.
So are you taking another course this term as well?
Three.
Three, oh God. So what are the, what is the other two?
Assessment. I'm taking the assessment and this one, and I'm taking one on gaming.
On gaming. Okay. Oh, good. So have you enjoyed the program? It's a fairly new program. So
well, we just started last week. Yeah, it looks like it's gonna be interesting.
Good.
And engaging. So looking forward to all that we have to offer.
Would you like to just bring another chair and 7, 8. Okay. Sorry. Yes.
Everyone, my name is Tian. Chinese name is Sweet, and this is also my last semester at OID. So my major is in language teaching. Actually, I'm now preparing tomorrow's online class. Yeah, so now I am a part-time Mandarin teacher, so I want to make sure my students have better online course. So that's why
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm a part-time curriculum and pedagogy student. I work full-time as an instructional designer at Mohawk College. And then I'm also a math professor at Mohawk and a science professor at Conestoga.
Wow.
So I'm pretty busy.
Any identities?
Yeah, so I'm here because this is the field that I work in.
Okay, you're welcome. Here. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. I don't hear you. Can you?
Hi everyone, I'm Sanjana. I'm a second year AD student at OIB, and my field is language and education.
Okay.
I'm currently doing a global specialization in knowledge media design and
Right. I remember that now. Yes.
and I'm also like a student researching virtual learning. So like I'm
Okay. Nice, welcome.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a second year student in the Master of Teaching program in primary junior, and I am also a McMaster graduate. I graduated in 2022 for social psychology, and that's my background. I'm here because I'm really interested in online learning, and I'm going to be doing my research on COVID-19 and like the whole period of time where students were online learning for about a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay, Rachel.
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm in my second year. I'm part-time in curriculum and pedagogy. I have a background in early childhood, so I graduated from Brock, and then I went to Nipissing to get my B.Ed, so I supply teach at the same time. And I'm here because I did have a period of time where I graduated during the pandemic and I taught online during the pandemic. So I'm just interested in this course and getting to learn more about online learning.
Okay. Thank you.
Morning, afternoon. My name is Desiree and I am doing the Master of Teaching program in the primary junior section. I'm taking this course because I'm interested in learning about online designs. I would like to eventually teach online. So I'm interested in knowing how to navigate that. It's a bit complex and yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I always think about when we try to teach, and I think one of the things that will become very clear as we start to do the readings and think about the issues in this course is, and things that you already know because you're all teachers of some kind or another, is how differently, what a wide range of people and backgrounds that people have, and it's so we can never make any kind of assumptions about what people already know or or don't know. And I was just curious if we could just go very quickly around the table, just shout out the discipline that your last completed degree was in. You know what I mean? So just shout out the subject matter, name. Thomas, we'll start with you again.
Okay. Oh, so I'm just graduated from the Western University, major in economics.
Okay, so economics,
Psychology.
psychology,
Management.
management,
Mathematics.
mathematics, preschool education.
Postgraduate in education, part of Nigeria.
Okay.
Media.
Sorry?
Media was.
Oh, you were there, that's right, medieval studies,
Science kinesiology.
science, theology,
Education applied linguistics.
okay,
Applied in
oh, two.
Social psychology,
Education, primary, junior.
Anthropology and cinema.
Okay,
Applied linguistics.
yeah, and mine was education and actually applied cognitive science, so, boy, there's no overlap, almost no overlap, isn't that, I mean, that's really, it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind, as we kind of go on this kind of adventure together and talk to each other online over the next little while. So that variability is always there, and people come with disciplinary knowledge, right? And it affects how we interpret, what we remember, how we understand. So it's just a good thing to keep in mind. I'm going to leave this thing because I think we'll just we'll move into the content. Oh, and I want to say again, please feel free to get up and help yourself to food over here because there's lots of it, and it's sort of lunchtime a little bit later, and there's all kinds of things, so please do help yourself there. I'll just give you a little bit of background about me. So I've been working in educational technology really since the beginning of the internet. Can you imagine? It really wasn't there when I started out, and we were doing very strange, very different ways of still doing online learning, but in a very different way. I was involved for a long time in designing online learning environments for K-12 students, with a real focus on trying to understand deep learning in blended classrooms. And some of you have probably heard of CFOR or Knowledge Forum and Pepper, because that's what we're using. And that was actually, I worked with my colleague, Jim Hewitt. And but more recently, I've been doing higher ed and fully distance classes, and mostly grad and teacher education. And I have a variety of funded research that I've been doing too. And most recently, I'm the former chair of CTL and the co-designer with Jim and Pepper, which is our collaborative in-house environment, which is desperately in need of upgrading and modernizing, but we're so, both of us are so busy that we haven't kind of done that. This is always one of the problems of making in-house stuff, right? It doesn't improve as quickly as it should. So. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just give you, the purpose of this is really to give you kind of an overview, a bird's eye view of the kind of structure of what is out there and the distance that we've come. So there was initially this educational focus on, and a real commitment actually to openness in distance education, and now we're at this much more internet-based, pragmatic, and very broad adoption of online learning. But the values of actually inclusiveness was there right from the beginning, and it actually got a bit warped when it came into web-based situations with the internet, because it started to become a really profit-filled activity, and so for universities, and so there are some things that interestingly that changed, and we'll talk a bit about that. Oh, another thing I was going to say is please stop me and ask a question at any time. It's, otherwise I'll just keep on going. So I have to stop. So then we see one of the things that I've been always most interested in is how the internet sort of enabled learning communities. Distance learning was always very much your one-on-one, right? You at one end and the instructor at the other. So the rise of collaborative learning, and I'm going to go through why interaction is so kind of foundation to understanding this in a minute. So, and there's been a big evolution of the theories that informed how learning is understood. And we're going to talk about what do each of these theoretical approaches let us do? How do they help us in our understanding of learning and design? But then at the end, this is really what we're going to talk about today. I'll go a little bit over some of the structure of the course in case that's helpful, and you can ask me questions about that. So that's the kind of where we're going, okay? Oh, and then the last, oh, that's right, there was one more. Danny, who introduced herself at the end here, is going to give us a little overview of some of her work on inclusion and exclusion. And one of your assignments the Learning Journal assignment, one of those entries in week 5, where we do critical theory, will can address some issues that I think are very relevant, but haven't really hitherto been much part of online learning theoretical research. There's been a kind of gap. It's stayed with some of the other theories. So Danny's going to just talk to us a little bit about that. And we'll have breaks like this too, so it's not going to just be on and on and on. All right. So let's start with the journey between distance learning to collaborative web-based. So we know it was paper-based, it was easily accessible, and then there was this real emphasis on openness, but it was all about individual learning. And now we're looking much more at web-based, more increasingly accessible, and many different learning models. And there really are a lot of learning models, and partly depending on where. I mean, there's business models, there's training kind of modules and all of that kind of thing as well. Different models within educational contexts. So, I lost my notes here. So, sorry. In order to make this simpler with the technology, I printed a lot of this off. So, yeah. My own which side 7. Okay. So, so it's this increase in interaction that I want to talk about, and the importance of that. And it's also the other thing that's interesting about collaborative learning is it also became a really important soft skill. Like workplaces wanted you to be good at collaboration and teams, working in teams, and all of this. So there was there's been a lot of pressure to do more collaborative learning, even though in my experience of teaching, there's lots of times where people say to me, no, I like to work on my own. I don't want to be made to work in a team. And but so there's still that tension, and I agree. I think it's helpful for some people more than others, but there are areas of this that started out like computer-supported collaborative learning, for instance, that specifically, prioritize collaboration in any learning situation that had computer technology, including classroom-based, blended, fully online learning. So, so we're going to look now at the challenges in understanding interaction and its relationship to learning, and why this is an issue. So, one of the things that we try to do in courses is increase sense of community, because it's safer. Sense of community creates trust, and then ideally, which allows more people to interact through discussion instead of just hanging back. And that's engagement. And the more engagement allows you to surface ideas, even including wrong ideas sometimes, but which is good because it encourages you to then to develop more accurate ideas or think about something in a different way. And that encourages more debate. And more debate and discussion increases time on task. And that increases also, the other thing it increases is depth of processing. So you're more likely to remember it and to actually, store it. So that gives you a greater understanding of content, which eventually, ideally, should lead to better learning. So that's great, but then there are other things that go on there. So the stuff in red is all of the kind of, the stuff that's more invisible, but we need to kind of think about. So power relationships. So in a class like this, you know, they are kind of inevitable, even that you're graduate students, you know, you're mature people, you have jobs, you have lives. But there's still the teacher, you know, I'm the teacher and you're the students, so there's that power relationship still exists. So a lot depends on how that's managed. And there's a lot of, you know, things to consider there. Then we have to look at who is participating, what their goals are, what their prior experiences is. One of my doctoral students some years ago did a really interesting study where he talked to all of the students in the course who were not white, and he had some really important heart-to-heart conversations with them. And what he learned, which many of you would know anyway, is that people don't always show who they really are. They keep a lot of themselves back, and he coined a term for that called social absence. And I've always remembered that. And it was a real learning thing for me because I thought I was being so nice and so inclusive. I didn't really understand. It was before I had really got to understand more about critical theory. So that was a very important thing that I've never forgotten. So thinking about that, about who's participating and what people need is very important too. And what counts as engagement? A lot of times, you know how in classrooms, the people who talk the most, always have their hand up, are the ones who get the most attention. Well, the same thing happens online, right? There are some people who just like to write a lot, and so you see them. But what I have done over the years is actually use other measures of engagement, of what engagement means. Things like how much you read. That's a huge predictor. How much you read of the course conference. And there are tools in Pepper actually that sort of help you kind of look at that. So participation itself is actually more diffuse, and also how much do you interact with the other people in the course, as opposed to just writing notes yourself but not replying. So it's quite differentiated, I think, and it's important to think about that too. It's easy to forget that. Whose voice is acknowledged? And that's another thing. It's like who responds to who? Are there people who are not getting answered and listened to and heard? And that's a really important piece as well. And better learning, and that of what? What is it just the content, or is it many other kinds of things? And I'm thinking here of ideas like the hidden curriculum, where there is a sort of a whole bunch of things that we don't really speak about explicitly, and there's a whole lot of learning goes on in the course that isn't about the content we're teaching. And so I think for us all to be, remember that and be aware of that is certainly something I try to do. I don't always do it fully, but I kind of know it's there. So that's why interaction is such a a valuable tool, but there's a whole lot to think about in when you consider it. So now I'm going to go through it's not a huge amount of things. But I wanted to frame, this is the kind of topology of what we're looking at, of the theories that we're going to look at, and what they kind of link to. And each of the, depending on the theory that we are talking about, they have very different implications for instructional design and for what we look at when we're doing online learning. So we start out with cognitive theories on the left there. And that's in the head learning, you can think about that as, right? So I keep getting ahead of my own notes. I'll just catch up with myself. Way ahead of the time. Can't even really make sense. Okay. So so we're going to look at cognitive theories and the notion of cognitivism, which is really about how the brain processes information. And then we're going to, so that's much more in the head. And it comes from psychology. I mean, that's its domain, its disciplinary. But then it also, psychology is also the kind of base for part of the ideas about constructivist theories. So it's like constructivist theories bring in some of the in the head stuff with a connection to the world. So what happens outside the head. And so it touches both psychology and a little bit of sociology. And but constructivism still is like the big theory that undergirds a great deal of what we do in thinking about in learning generally, because and partly because it does touch on both of these things. And there's many different kinds of constructivist theories. We're not going to go into that in more detail, but you may see that word used in all kinds of different settings. So, and we're going to go into that a little bit more in the next. This is kind of the overview. So, and then the third kind of group of theories is critical theory. And that is quite clearly lies in the area of sociology. This is about what is going on in the world. And it connects to some of the things in red that we saw in that interaction diagram. It was kind of issues. So that's the kind of the outline of the areas that we're going to look at in the course. Okay, I'm just going to. So we're going to look now at how these various theoretical approaches give us understanding of all. So cognitivism. So this is this much more in the head theory, and it looks at capacities and limits that we have in storing memories and processing information. And have you heard of any of these things? Just put up your hand if you have. Cognitive load, is that something you've ever heard of? Yeah, couple, yeah, good. Information processing theory, yeah, all right. Massed versus distributed practice. That which basically means when you learn something all at once, or you do it, over time. And rehearsal, the idea of rehearsal, yeah, which means that saying something, going over something a lot, helps it stay in your head better. So we will be looking more at that. And I'm just going to show you this once. I got this diagram in the course too, because it's complicated, but not crazy. So I'm just going to take you through it just so it doesn't look, so you're not put off by this if you come across it before. So basically this is information processing theory assumes that it might be helpful to think about the human brain as if it were a computer, and as if it was like that, and it worked like that. So it starts on the left at the top with environmental input, so things that are out there, things that we're seeing around us, sensory input, sights and sounds, and that stuff goes into sensory memory, which is like a pre-memory that before you really processed it. And if you pay attention to it, it will go into short-term memory. If you don't, it'll just be forgotten. So you'll be out on a walk and there are things that you see and there are things you don't see, and they're gone, and other things that you see and then you forget by the time you get home. So then in short-term memory, with rehearsal, with going over it again, it's like getting ready for a test, and you keep going over things. That maintenance allows that to stay in short-term memory. And if you don't do a lot of that, that gets forgotten, either because it falls away, or something else comes in, something else happens, and you completely forget what you were just thinking about because this thing is more exciting and has stopped you. So to get something from short-term memory to long-term memory, you have to elaborate it, you rehearse it more. So that's like getting ready for a test, or reading something and asking questions of it, or talking about that thing with somebody else. And if you do a lot of that, it'll go into long-term memory. And then, which is great, then you've got it there, but sometimes you can forget how to get it out. So it goes in, it stays there, but if you don't interact with it for a long time, sometimes it's hard to get back to it. So I like to think that that's when I forget words that are harder to retrieve, that this is what's happening. I'm getting sort of interference, retrieval failure, which I can work on by doing some of these things better. So, so that's the main kind of part of that. So I just wanted you to see that. So no one's going to make you like learn this. I just wanted to give you a sense of what underlies some of the assumptions that we make about how we learn in some of these theories that never actually go back and talk about it. So, and then we come to constructivism. So, and it's got lots of variants, and you may have seen these in the literature. So there's social constructivism, which emphasizes more the interactive part of how knowledge gets learned and brought into your thinking. Sociocultural theory, which is really looking in more detail, is more sociological, if you like. It goes more in that direction and looks at the outside experiences that you would have. And constructivism views learning as individuals constructing knowledge in their heads based on, very importantly, prior experience, current knowledge, and own goals, and your motivations for learning, which is one of the reasons I went around to see what your last degree was, because we all come with these different kind of views. So there are different theories, and we're going to look at some of, and different instructional models, I'm sorry, that come out of these theories, like community of inquiry, COI. We're going to look at that in the course. Transactional distance, which is another theory which some of you may have experienced before. Computer-supported collaborative learning, that's what CSCO is. And the idea, too, that learning is situated. So that wherever you learn something, not just by itself, it's not just knowledge sort of decontextualized, that it's learned in a situation. And that will, sometimes you have knowledge associated with a particular situation. And when you're in another situation that's a little different, it doesn't occur to you that that piece of learning could also apply here. So it's another one of the constraints that happens when we find that learning hasn't perhaps happened the way we expected it to when we're teaching. And then there's this third big group of these things is critical theories and perspectives. And this is something that historically has really not been part of online learning. Like there really wasn't, they were separate things. And in fact, my colleagues here who are critical theorists and whose work is in this area say, oh, you can't do that stuff online. It's just, you just can't do it. You can't get the same kind of safe space and trust. And I do think it is a challenge, actually. I think there are different kinds of challenges, and we saw a lot of them in COVID, actually. Assumptions about having cameras on, cameras off. What does that mean to make somebody do something like that? But I think even the people who are the most absolutely against this are now seeing that, well, yes, I guess you can work on this, but there's still. Ruben Gastambi Fernandez, as some of you may know, he's a faculty member here, tells me that he still doesn't think that you can do it properly in an online setting. And he's a much better critical theorist than I, so I can believe that we have a ways to go. But I mean, this is really firmly in the sociological area and focused on broader issues of inclusion and power and access, social justice. So, and that's why it's important, I think, that we understand and get more information about experiences of inclusion and exclusion and the nature of community, but from this kind of perspective. So this is the really different piece that I brought into this course, because I used to teach the other pieces, but there wasn't enough of this. And in fact, in the literature on online learning, there's very little critical theory work. But I think we're in a moment where we need to be doing more of this. So I try to bring this in gently into this course so that we, you know, you can think about that and as we go on. So, oh yes, that's right. So I think this actually would be a good point to have a little bit of a break and to please go and have some more food. And then we could just come and perhaps do, you know, just elbow partners, just to talk to each other and we'll just go around. So, and then, or you could get up and walk around and just talk to somebody for a couple of minutes. Your particular area, you know, a fun fact about you, or, you know, and your things that you're interested in, because there are opportunities to do collaborative work in this course if you'd like to. So, so you can think about that for projects and stuff, or even, you know, like one would do in a face-to-face course, that you go out and have coffee with somebody and talk about something, you know, and work through an idea. So why don't we do that? Let's get up. It's good to stretch your legs a bit and get something else to have, and then we'll come back and continue. Oh, in case you, I don't know, I'm assuming that those little things, those little triangles are spanakopita, which is a Greek, they're very delicious. They got spinach and pepper pea.
I really have to try. Lunch traffic is bad, but traffic is scary.
Something else. Come from, Kipling, when I drive from Kipling, leave my car and then subway. Yeah, oh my God.
I came from Mississauga this morning
Oh, yeah.
by train as well.
Oh.
There's no way I can drive it to.
Yeah.
It just takes years off of your life. When I get driving to Toronto. Where do you live? It's. I left my house. I left my house at 9:30.
Oh, wow.
But I had to go to Hamilton and then go to the station, train station and Aldershot. And moving on,
You're around, right? You're all the time about 9:30 this morning.
or I didn't leave Hamilton until quarter after 10. And I left like 11 or 7.
Right. I'm currently rewriting my energy proposal. So I have to very quickly. And you guys have really open up this on the kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
I get more. I get really bad. What bothers me about would find nothing. And you live in the I live in Fairfield.
I just clicked through.
Yeah, I can also kind of maybe the environment part of the hidden curriculum, because like for the school, when like students come, there's a place they learn. Even there's no kind of instructors before, they know it's a place for learning, but maybe a place like playground, they come like when they back home, they kind of find a place for playing, and it's kind of also like the environment can have a kind of a cue for students, what should they do in that moment, that place.
Yeah, Absolutely. So the environment is a huge source of hidden curriculum, and I think the distinction you made is really interesting because a lot of educational institutions have been built to say this is where real learning occurs, but the playground is also a very valid place to learn.
It is.
But somehow we differentiate and we say, well, look at our ivory tower, look at our fancy buildings. This is real learning. Learning out there in the real world doesn't count. So it's actually a really interesting example of where the hidden curriculum.
May I add something else? Can I add something else?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think in the assessment, the type of assessment and the, what is being assessed, it can also reflect the hidden curriculum.
Absolutely. So that actually assessment is one of the most common examples when we talk about the hidden curriculum, because for most students, assessment is where they see value. If you say, I'm going to assess these things, you're instantly saying to students, this is what matters. Everything else I teach, if it's not going to be on the test, doesn't matter. That's the hidden curriculum of assessment. It's not true, but assessment drives motivation. So that's actually a really, really good example. And a lot of my work, I won't go into this here, is about how assessment is actually really important when we talk about critical pedagogy, because we can use assessment to control students and how students think. So that's a great example. So I'm going to jump forward and talk or show you some other places where the hidden curriculum can live. So the actual curriculum itself, really what happens in the classroom, so the language that we use in the classroom, whether it's like English or another language, or the level of language. So are we using really dense academic language, or are we using more inclusive, simple language? So that hidden curriculum lives in our language structures. It lives in our assessments, as we just discussed. It lives in the course content. So whose voices appear in our courses? What different cultures contribute to the body of knowledge that we're sharing in our courses? Where does this knowledge come from? How is it produced? That's very much part of the hidden curriculum. The communication method. So how can we get in touch with our instructor? Is it always one-way communication? Is it more of a community feel? The course schedules is part of the hidden curriculum. So when do we hold classes? How flexible do we have classes? Do we have mandatory attendance, or do we have more flexibility? The course outcomes. So the course outcomes, again, say what's important, what's actually valuable learning. The course activities. So these are sort of maybe the things that more obviously are where the hidden curriculum may live, because they are the curriculum. But in our institutions, it's not just about the classroom. So the hidden curriculum also exists in the classroom itself. In the example we saw, if our classrooms are structured for that power dynamic, there is a hidden curriculum there. They exist on our campuses. So when we walk through the campus, Claire and I were talking about this earlier this week, what buildings are new and fancy and look great, and what buildings are old and sort of falling apart? I'm gonna pause. Does anyone have an idea or thoughts on that?
They're very specific faculties.
Yeah, the education department at any university will always be like this drab old building. I went to Montreal recently and I went to the guild, and the education building was the only one that wasn't old, architecturally impressive. It was just so disheartening.
So again, don't want to pick on Western, but our big, beautiful buildings are engineering. The Ivy Business School.
Yes,
business. Yeah. Our Faculty of Health Sciences is getting a facelift. The Faculty of Nursing, and our really old buildings that are very outdated. Does anyone want to guess which buildings do not have fancy new builds? Education. Education is also like miles away from the rest of the campus. But what other buildings or faculties? Yeah, arts and humanities, very old building, very depressing building. Any other guesses? And what? Arts. History, yeah. So all of the arts and humanities types disciplines, the physical buildings appear much less. So the hidden curriculum there is if you come to the campus, students are going to be drawn to those big, fancy, shiny metal glass buildings because we're saying those disciplines matter more. And that's a big part of the hidden curriculum. So also our accrediting bodies. So I've worked in a lot of professional programs where outside people come in and say, this is what you need to learn. This is what valuable learning is. The culture of the institution. So how do we set the tone? How do we set who belongs here and who doesn't? Who's present on campus? Policies. So we talk about assessment. A lot of faculty I work with want to do more flexible assessment, and their policies don't let them. Their policies say your class average cannot be higher than a 78. So we're saying students can't all be perfect because the policy says so. And that's part of the hidden curriculum, saying we can't create an institution where everyone succeeds. The program itself, so not just each course, but how all the courses in a program come together. The norms, so what is expected? A lot of faculty teach the way they were taught. I call those inherited pedagogies, but they were taught to lecture because every single time they went to school, they were lectured at. And that's normal. So that's part of the hidden curriculum. And then finally, the technologies. So what we're actually going to talk about for the next couple of slides is the technologies. We often make the assumption that technology is neutral. And technology is not neutral. Technologies largely are built to reflect the biases, the assumptions, the values in our social systems. But because we've convinced ourselves and we've convinced the world that technology is not human, technology can't make mistakes, it's neutral, we trust technologies more. So we're going to actually talk about how assumptions, beliefs, and values can be embedded in technologies. I only have 2 examples because I think I was only supposed to have 15 minutes and I've been talking way more than my time. But I have 2 examples of digital environments, and similar to our physical environment that we looked at earlier, I want you to look at this and tell me what values, assumptions, and beliefs about education are embedded in this space. So the picture has a green check mark. It says correct, and it says this is correct. You selected the correct response. Continue. So what values, assumptions, and beliefs about education are embedded in this space?
You should get it right.
Yeah, you should get it right.
Yes, and then what matters is that you get it right and you are not allowed to make mistakes, because if you do, then you have to repeat this or reread the question and then move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's saying that the value of learning is correctness. Going a little bit beyond that as well, any other thoughts on what values, assumptions, and beliefs about education are embedded in this space? Yeah.
Maybe if you have a different response, it doesn't matter. This is the only one that is correct, and that's the only way you can move forward. So,
yeah. So the fact that there can be one correct response. Sometimes these systems can be programmed for like 2 or 3 correct responses, but it's saying there is a limitation to what could be correct here. So knowledge is either right or wrong. So it does impose a certain level of objectivity on how knowledge is constructed. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like sometimes it's like the mindset is also really important, right? It's kind of making an incorrect answer, it also give much more feedback than we did this right. Because we did it right, we'll just think 1 + 1 is 2, it's right, and we just keep going. We will not come back again and to seek feedback, and that's what we can improve and develop. But the computer just said you're correct, just keep going, and do not need to review or think about that, because you already get the right answer. So that kind of give the like a fixed method that only correct and wrong. There's nothing what we can improve or what space we can just get even like develop or grow.
Yeah, that's right. Go deeper or do something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all in the feedback message. This is correct. You selected the correct response. It doesn't give you more. It doesn't say, you got this correct. Now think about this, or do this with this information, or something else. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very simple screenshot, but there's a lot of hidden curriculum. And I only have one more example. So this is a screenshot from a tool called Kahoot. Has anyone used Kahoot? Yeah, most people have used Kahoot. So it's a gamification system where students all have to answer questions. You get more points the more quickly you respond to the question. And similar to the last picture, there is a right and wrong answer. So in the picture, you see the scoreboard. It has 5 students' names, all ranked, and then the top student is highlighted with a high score of 28,008 points. And the lowest student showing up on the scoreboard is 7,658 points. So what values, assumptions, and beliefs about education are embedded in this space?
That is the competition.
Yeah.
That you're either a winner or a loser, right? You're the one of them.
So it pits students against each other. So it goes back to what I was saying before about you have to have a certain average for your class. So some students get to succeed and other students naturally have to fail or do worse because we're ranking students.
I think it goes back to quick learning. Like you have to think quick. You have to be kind of like on your toes and thinking quick. If you take time to think, then you haven't succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to what we we're talking about neurotypical and neurodivergent learners. Some learners need more time to process information. It doesn't mean that they're failures. It doesn't mean they're not learning. They just learn differently. And this type of environment is saying, well, only the learners who can do it quickly are going to succeed. Yeah.
It's kind of tells a single story that tells us that Nathan is the best and followed by children, but it doesn't tell us all the circumstances that surround these couples. Who knows whether James was having some tech issues? Who knows whether he was not even in part? But then it presents them in a negative way. Everyone is looking at that and saying and feeling that that's what it is. But there's so much that we don't know about the circumstances that led to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that actually is a reflection on grades generally, how we rank students generally, is that we say grades are how much you learn. So students with higher grades learn more. And we simplify it, but all of those contextual factors impact grades all the time. So the students, if we go back to that idea of those privileged students, the students who are wealthy, who don't have to work a part-time job, or the students who are young who maybe aren't caretakers for their parents or for children, or the students who have stable housing are all going to get better grades. And our grades reflect all of that. Similar to here, the students who don't have tech issues, but we just say the grades show who learned the most. And it's really not that simple. So there's a lot of hidden curriculum and how we evaluate students. I'm gonna pause quickly. Do you need me to give you back the?
No, it's okay. I had another thing about this is that it seems to me that everybody who, this idea that you show other people's scores comparatively to everyone, the only person who doesn't feel humiliated by that is the person who maybe came first. But all the other people, even if they've done better than the rest of the people in the class, are individually made to feel worse because of this. It's like it's just a horrible thing to do. I don't know.
Well, then at the bottom where you see up to 10 places, Michelle is the highest climber. She didn't even rank on the scoreboard. So there's other students who aren't even being reflected on the scoreboard at all. Okay, so we've talked about the hidden curriculum as a concept and how our technological spaces and basically every single element of education has hidden values, beliefs, and assumptions. So now going back all the way to what we were talking about at the beginning, that idea of critical theory, that idea of how we build environments that include and exclude, how can the hidden curriculum perpetuate exclusions? How can these things that are invisible but working in our courses, in our institutions, perpetuate or help maintain that circle of power and privilege? This is sort of a bit of a heavier question, but any thoughts on how the hidden curriculum can exclude students?
I think if we go back to course content and resources and marginalized communities, if you walk into a classroom or a library and you see representation not shown, or you see books that probably have more white students than Black students, or there's no culture shown in some books or something like that, then that would perpetuate that exclusion in that school, that we value certain students or certain identities over others.
Yeah, absolutely. And so working in medical education and health education, one thing we do a lot is write cases. And all of our case writers wanted every patient to be named John or Jane. Our patients were always John and Jane, which are very westernized, very common westernized names. And even just asking them like choose different names, choose people representative of other cultures was a big ask. And it's that very same thing where we're saying, well, patients can only be white, like white middle class people named John and Jane. So that's a very, very good example of how it perpetuates exclusions. And as a white person, it's something that it took me a while to see because I always saw myself reflected. Any other examples of how the hidden curriculum can perpetuate exclusions?
It's all unconscious. I mean, it's all, nobody's aware of it, so it can't but perpetuate. You know, there's no challenge, so on it goes.
Anyone who doesn't have access.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to sort of those 4 tiers of access, accessibility, representation, and belonging, access is the first one. And right now, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the Canadian or the Ontario government is pushing universities to start complying with AODA regulations, which are Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And so these regulations were made many, many years ago, and higher education institutions were never in compliance. They just were always like, oh, we'll get there eventually. And now they have a deadline and they're pushing to do it. And it's become a big deal because the institutions are not very agile. It's going to be a lot of work for them to simply comply with the baseline of accessibility. And so that's a really good example, is because institutions were never inviting spaces for disabled students.
Or even something as simple as, I remember in one class we were talking about school dress code and things like that. How that can reflect for students that want to show their identity or display themselves in ways, their creativity, or it can limit that as well.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's actually one that I've not heard before. Clothing choices are very personal, and that is actually a really, really good example. And now you've made me think also of like institutions with gender uniforms. Yeah. Enforcing students to choose gender identity through the clothes that they choose. So it's a really great example. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Yeah, we will get into this more in week 5 as well, but the point of this is really just to start thinking about it. Okay, so some other ways that we've already talked about a lot of this, but when we talk about how the hidden curriculum can perpetuate exclusions, we talked about accessibility. So being able to access buildings, being able to participate. We talked about representation, so who is visible in the curriculum and who is not. When we talk about technologies, representation also often leads to algorithmic bias. So when we say technology is not neutral, has anyone used generative AI? Yeah, all students now are saying, no, I've never used generative AI. Don't worry, I'm not cheating. But generative AI is trained on these massive data sets of biased data. So generative AI, algorithmic bias, it represents algorithmic bias because it will always show the dominant way of thinking about the world. It will always show the ideas from whose voice was most present in those data sets. So a good example of this is in the States, there was an AI algorithm that was built to determine if a criminal would be likely to commit a crime again. And it was trained on all the historic sentencing data. And the algorithm that they used ended up flagging racialized offenders as being much more likely to recommit crimes or much more likely to go to jail for longer periods of time. And that's not because they actually would be more likely to do it. It's because the system sentenced them more, because the judges were biased, because the judges had racist ways of sentencing. But we took that data set and we said, well, now we'll make it neutral. We'll take it and we'll make it objective. So these people will actually reoffend more. And it just reflects the already biased data. So algorithmic bias is a really interesting example of how the hidden curriculum perpetuates exclusions. We talked about dominant knowledge systems. So in our literature, it's often white male authors who dominate our reading lists in higher education. Dominant languages. So when we talk about things like open educational resources, which are a tool for inclusion, most of them are written in English. So we are perpetuating the dominance of English and English knowledge in a lot of our educational resources, and dominant power relationships. So we saw that very early image of the classroom designed that way. A lot of our technologies are designed that way too. Our learning management systems are places where instructors can post content, students can read content. So this is my summary. Online environments mirror the hidden curriculum of existing educational systems, so our technologies are not neutral. They simply are replicating what's already happening in the way institutions are built. So for us, the thing I want to leave you with is, as digitally literate educators, we need to be aware of these hidden assumptions, values, and beliefs to do our job. As you guys start thinking about online learning environment, as you guys start building your own online learning experiences, think about how you're building them, what assumptions you're making about who your students are and how they'll engage, what assumptions you're making about what learning is and how to demonstrate learning, and think about if you can design differently to include more students, to allow more students to belong in those spaces. I have my deep research slides. Do you want me to show you it? Okay. So all of this is related to my doctoral research, which is I'm going to use critical storytelling. I'm going to get students to tell me stories of inclusion and exclusion in higher education. So at the beginning of this, I asked you guys to all think about your own experiences of inclusion and exclusion. I'm actually going to collect those stories. That's where we start. So as Claire mentioned, until we can see where the hidden curriculum lives, how the hidden curriculum functions, we can't do anything about it. After that, I'm going to look at the invisible and visible threads of influence on teaching practices. So in higher education institutions, we often say, well, teachers need to do better. Teachers need to be more inclusive. So we're going to look at how teachers practice. And my hypothesis, my argument is teachers can only do so much. They only have so much agency in the classroom because of all of those other factors, because there are policies that say you can't really be inclusive, because there are technologies that say you can't really be inclusive, because there are buildings with broken elevators and without ramps that say you can't really be inclusive. So I'm going to talk to instructors to see where do they have power to make change and what else is stopping them from being more inclusive. And then finally, I'm going to bring the learners and instructors together to co-design more equitable futures for education. So we're going to look at how do we actually change higher education to be more inclusive, to fix all of these problems, to ameliorate the hidden curriculum. And this is built on the idea that right now, education is in this huge amount of turmoil, first from COVID-19, now from generative AI. So right now we have the power to shape what tomorrow is going to look like in higher education. We hope. Thank you for your optimism, Claire.
My age is showing.
This is based on what I hope came across in this is that inclusion and exclusion are done by design. The way we build education says who can belong and who can't. This also is based on the assumption that teaching and learning occur at the center of the web of influences. So again, teachers don't have all the power. There are many, many things influencing how we teach. And we need to see all of these influences in order to know how teaching is occurring now. And we need to do this in order to make the future better. So that is actually the end. I went way over my 15 minutes.
No, that was really interesting, and it fits so nicely with all of this. It's funny, you know, when you were doing that, I was thinking about that interaction diagram that I showed earlier. I did that a long time ago, but but the critical pieces that came up, the red text, that was the last layer, sort of fit so nicely with that. We couldn't have coordinated that better if we tried, which we didn't. So that's which is nice. It makes sense that we're going in a good direction. That's really good. Does anybody have any questions? Anything you want to add?
Thank you all for your feedback and participation.
How can we get involved in data, or like how can we?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that. I had mentioned before that in the learning journals, that when we got to week 5, that's something that we could do. The learning journal for that week could be on these kinds of topics, because that's going to be the kind of the week that we focus on that. But then once we've done that, we can also continue it. And in fact, Danny would really like it if people were interested, there is an opportunity to kind of sign up and be part of the research group in different ways, and interviews. You might want to talk more about that. And it's obviously it has nothing to do with marks. It's entirely your own kind of decision. It would be outside of the course itself, except for the learning journal research. I think just get some people into that. So, I mean, you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah, so I think there will be opportunities because you guys are looking at this both as learners and as instructors. There will be opportunities to reflect on both of those pieces. So if you have your own experiences of exclusion or of inclusion or of both that you wish to share and articulate, I will be collecting those narratives. But if you also want to think about practice, maybe how you felt constrained and how you teach, or maybe how you haven't thought about this before, but you've started to notice the places where the hidden curriculum exists in your own teaching environments, I'll be collecting those narratives as well. And then eventually, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but there will be like a co-design workshop. We'll be inviting students and instructors to kind of come together to work on this sort of like speculative design for how do we, I'm not gonna say fix all the problems because that's really optimistic, but how do we start to kind of untangle the hidden curriculum and look at how we can make change happen? So there will be lots of opportunities. We're just sort of shaping them, but in this class, there will be opportunity for those narratives.
Right. Yes, which, and as I said, is entirely voluntary, but it's definitely there. Okay. So does anybody have any other questions they want to ask, issues they want to raise? Are we all kind of okay about going away and getting back online and living with each other virtually for this course until, of course, the last week of term where we could have another something like this, but the conversation at that time would be about AI and about what we see as a kind of future, because I think it's a good place to end the course at that time. So any other questions or? Right. Yeah. Maybe I can ask later. No, you can ask. Please, they're about that. About what?
What is that fine?
About the assignments?
Yes.
They're described in quite a bit of detail online. Did you,
yeah, I will maybe.
Okay, yeah, or I can talk to you after if you'd like. That would be fun. And I would encourage you before you leave to take even bought bags. If there's anything you want to stick with you, please. Yeah, I got a little Ziploc bag if you want. Anything you want to take, please feel free. And I want you all for coming. It was really nice to meet you in person. It's different, you know, when you actually see people around the table. And yeah, so thank you for coming, and I will see you soon online. Yeah. About the online? Yes. So I'm a little bit confused on whether the due dates are, because like on the main assignment, we have proposal. It says in 160, no, it's the years, it's the, yeah. It's, yes, and so, okay, so the main assignment. On the description, on the purpose description, I think it says the 19, but on the outline, yeah, I would go by the stuff in the course. I think, yes, go in the actual course itself, like the week by week. Yes. I thought I corrected all the things in there. I'm sorry about that. It's just that there's so many things to go. It's a good mind. But I never like people like and it's really very, I mean, it's really, but it's really kind of it's generally at that place.
maybe. I mean, I know it sounds good for those two there. One of the things that so there's no classroom. So not all the but I am like commenting on what my teachers. Yeah, I think it's pretty involved in cover. We try to
You go in there, we have my job, like what it means to be a discussion.
Okay.
Explain all of their cover, and also explain about the next what I expect and like, how it's right entries in the. So it's quite well explained. So yes, you're coming up with a question. You verify with me. And then you read your people writing and comment.
Okay.
On that.
Okay. Do I have to answer my? Because there's a few later.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, it kind of depends on. Yeah, you can do if you have the people leading. It depends which week it is. We've done it kind of differently in different places.
And there's 2 readings for that week, and I'm the only one. So I have to make my questions based on the. Right. Yes. Because more reading,
Right.
and then more side with the theory, but I think in my case would be both.
Right, but so that's.
Yeah,
so let's see. If you don't say, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
The idea is to learn from you. Freak out.
Oh, okay, thank you for saying that, just a little bit of.
Yeah, it's because. I mean, that's why we made, I didn't used to make discussion leading with an assignment.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Just sign. Bye, thank you. So, yeah, so don't worry, and in fact, whenever you have, so you can just get in touch. Whatever,
That's great. Okay, but thank you for asking me.
Yeah, so don't worry about.
Okay.
And leading with, one more. But you get some what I do is to think about. And then, right, it's not. Moderate, what it means, better moderate, and it's a different. And so, about, you don't want, I mean, read that, and it's better make you understand.
But like, what are you working for the coming week?
You don't have to do that. But that's in the right. So I read that you read all those, like really important.
Yeah.
Yes, they're helpful, they give you the kind of nitty-gritty and but I will say that, when you're doing it, somebody might come out in the discussion that you're moderating. Let's say, and you might be worried about, like, what am I going to say? I want to say something. Yeah. And you can get